Hey everyone, welcome to the 5 Beer Plan. I'm Brian, and this is the ongoing saga of an everyman's ale trail. In this episode, I'll recap my trip to the sunny south and wrap up my homebrewing shenanigans. In this segment of Tales from the Trail, you're going to take a little journey with me southward. This winter, we decided that we would leave the gray days and snow for a few weeks. It had been a number of years since we had taken such a winter journey, so figured we'd hop to it. The pre-planning finally came together after a couple of misfires on accommodations. We planned our route, packed up the car, and sojourned down I-75. As an aside, if you ever find yourself on a road trip down I-75, there's a great book by Dave Hunter called Along Interstate 75, which is a great resource if you're looking for adventures within 5 to 10 minutes off the highway. Please note, there aren't any breweries listed here, though. Anyway, I'm getting too old to drive nonstop anymore, so a stay or two along the way means we'll have a great vacation without being dog-tired starting out. Our first stop was Wilmington, North Carolina. The need to detour here on our journey goes all the way back to episodes 1 and 2 of the 5 Beer Plan. John Dispenza has been a mentor and friend for this era of my ale trail journey, so it was finally time to get a pint in hand and raise a toast together. Before doing so, a couple of quick stops before dinner were necessary. Flying Machine Brewing Company was first. The place was hopping, and we were fortunate to find both a parking spot for our car and a couple stools at the bar. The venue was open, industrial, and very chill. I've had a couple of stouts from them previously, so it was time for a flight to sample some of their other styles, which were equally tasty. Edward Teach, named after the pirate better known as Blackbird, was another amazing venue. There was a bar below, and above, a second-floor balcony that was shaped just like the deck of a ship. Flytrap was another highly recommended locale. It was a beautiful evening, and we sat out in their beer garden and enjoyed a flight of classic beer styles that were killer. New Anthem was the final brewery stop of the night, where we finally met up with John and Ashley for a couple of pours of some amazing IPAs. We finished up the night enjoying some great food and conversation at Rebellion. Thanks again to my North Carolina Beerskis for taking time out of your busy schedule. Since we knew we were going to be driving through Jacksonville, Florida, we were hopeful that a few breweries would be open on Sunday afternoon. The night before, I put together a wish list of a couple select locations where the everyman could sample Northeast Florida's beer scene. Anyone that's been listening to the podcast from the beginning knows I'm a sucker for brewery passports. So when we stopped into Intuition Ale Works for a flight, they asked if I had a Jack's Ale Trail passport. I didn't, so I took one, figuring it would be a great souvenir of the trip we were on. I just want to give props to my wife, who is the biggest supporter of my craft beer hobby. After taking a quick look at the rules in the passport while I sipped on my tasters, the amazing over-the-top Lemonhead candy-inspired outdoor type fruited sour set the tone for the evening. She noted that 4 stamps got you a koozie, but 8 stamps got you a shirt as well, and that's what she wanted us to aim for. After a quick Google search for open breweries near me, we hatched a plan and off we went. It was a whirlwind 3 hours as we crisscrossed Jacksonville. We enjoyed quick stops at Hyperion Brewing, String Sports Brewing, and Historically Hoppy, which were within blocks of each other, which was super convenient. Ruby Beach Brewing was a gem with over 20 beers on tap. The refreshing J. Villain Juice Blueberry Lime Sour was a highlight. Ardwolf had a great venue with way too many great sounding beers to try, though if you see it on tap, the notorious FIG Belgian Amber with vanilla, orange peel, and fig is a must-taste. Tepelo Cerveceria was another hidden gem, great food menu, and solid beers. Sadly, I didn't get to taste any beers at Wicked Barley as they were closing as we drove in. They took pity on me and stamped my passport anyway, wrapping up the second-tier rewards. Well, once we got settled into the greater Tampa area, the real fun began. But before I turn to that area, I want to give a little love to a couple breweries south of there. Motorworks Brewing in Bradenton is one that I have frequented a few times over the years. They have some great core beers, but their one-offs in the taproom are simply amazing. Everything that they touch turns to gold. The highlight here was the Tequila Barrel-Aged Datil, which was an imperial chocolate porter with Datil chili peppers, aged in blue agave tequila barrels. Corporate Ladder in Palmetto is a newcomer to the area. Specializing in sours, I could have spent every night there without being disappointed. How could you not like a place with cardboard cutouts of characters from The Office greeting you as you walk in the doors? The brandy barrel-aged banana marshmallow lunch break was to die for, and frankly, the beers we tasted from the Dessert Station series were off the charts. If you get anywhere in the area of those two places, be sure to stop in. There's something for everyone, and I really mean that. Anyway, I digress. In the last 3 to 5 years, the Tampa beer scene has exploded in this area of the state. I was massively unprepared for the number of new breweries to visit. Based on visits my main beerski made to the Sunshine State, as well as others and research I'd done, I had a core group of stops I wanted to make. Well, first up was tackling the Gulf Coast Craft Brewery Passport that covers St. Petersburg and Clearwater areas. More than 40 breweries are part of this passport, and even then, there were still some that didn't even participate. 15 unique check-ins guaranteed a custom t-shirt, and with that, the game was afoot. For the first round, we decided to go to downtown St. Pete and start out at St. Pete Brewing Company. They had decent beers and a great open-air venue that made for a great start on a sunny day. Right around the corner was much heralded Cycle Brewing. I wish I'd had a day to spend there. Their barrel-aged game is second to none in the area. The barrel-aged chocolate rye was to die for. As we were driving to Greenbench, my wife exclaimed, "Brewery!" And I quickly drove around the block and beheld what would be a little gem I didn't even have on my radar, Overflow Brewing. We spent a lot of time here. They make some very tasty sours. My fave here was the Zombie Lucas, which had notes of blueberry, dark cherries, and was conditioned on apple brandy-soaked oak chips. Yeah, it was as good as it sounds. Once we finally made it to Greenbench, it was obvious that we were definitely bringing up the age curve at this venue. They have a big open space where dogs, kids, families were playing. It was pretty cool. The beers were solid, but I was really drawn to a dark Czech lager called Tmave Pivo. It had a smokiness about it that was intriguing. Next up was Cage Brewing. Theirs is an interesting venue. They have a stage out in their beer garden, and that night a very loud band was playing. Anyway, we didn't stick around too long. The final gem of the night was Pinella's Ale Works, affectionately known as Paw. Great tasting beer, many with names related to dogs, a fantastic bar staff, with a shout out to Lauren and Joey for the great conversation and pours, and a very relaxing venue. Our second foray into St. Pete took us to much heralded The Brutalist. Talk about industrial. I love the venue, and their beers were outstanding. The dilated double IPA was a highlight here, though their IPA game overall is strong. We slipped down to the Warehouse Arts District to Grand Central Brewing, another one not even on my radar. Their Czech-inspired beer menu floored me. Too many good beers on my flight here. We literally went right around the corner to Right Around the Corner, a cool brewery and video arcade. I had a couple beers and played some X-Files pinball. And then within walking distance was If I Brewed the World, who had a dozen beers on their menu. The beery crunch smelled and tasted just like that piratey breakfast cereal. Three Daughters was another block down the road. I've had some of their flagship beers previously, so I know what they do well. Their venue was huge, and they have a great concert area. Solid food and solid beer. The final stop for the night was Bayboro Brewing. Barkeep Devin asked what I wanted, and since I was undecided, he gave me a half dozen samples of their various beers. He knew what he was talking about with the beer that was on tap. The Mexican hot cocoa was my favorite. It contained chocolate, vanilla, cinnamon, cayenne, and diarbol pepper. A great way to end the night. The final St. Pete tour took us to the northern boundary to Arcane Brewing in Largo. I was a little apprehensive since it was in a shopping mall, but it came recommended by more than a few people with a solid sour game. I wasn't disappointed. Wu-Tang Cran and Cherry Boomstick were a couple of highlights. We made our way southward, dropping into Big Storm Brewing. They have a great outdoor covered patio, and the place was hopping since it was Super Bowl Sunday. Their Ales for ALS variant for 2023 was outstanding. Next up was Raff Brewing in Seminole. Founder and brewer Greg Rapp has played a significant role in the craft industry in the greater St. Pete area. It's a great story that I hope to dig into in the future. Relative newcomer Peepaw's Garage in Pinellas Park is a nice family-owned business with a relaxing country kind of vibe. The beers I had were solid, so I wish them the best of luck. Since we were just a couple of stamps away from the Gulf Coast rewards, we ventured down to Treasure Island to Sea Dog for a pregame lager, and St. Pete Beach to Mastery's Brewing for a flight to end the night. And with that, mission accomplished. Coming up next was Tampa in 3 movements. The first movement was for 2 breweries that had been on my radar for quite a while. The first was Woven Water, and it did not disappoint. Besides the outstanding sours and IPAs, Barkeep Jasmine kept us entertained, treating us like we were regulars there. As an aside, this was a place we returned to later in our trip simply because of the fantastic service we had. Magnanimous Brewing was a second much heralded spot for IPAs. It was a serendipitous stop since I'm a metalhead. They had just released their Metallica-themed IPAs in memory of bassist Cliff Burton, with names like Whiplash, Ride the Haze Craze, Master of Hazies, and Hazy Up Your Ass. What's not to like? Plus, they had WWF, Baywatch, Bob Ross, and NCAA basketball playing on the TVs. I was in 80s heaven. The second movement around Tampa was an epic one. We went first to Old Seminole Heights, where we dropped into Ology. Great IPAs and sours as well, including 2 Christmas vacation-themed beers, Save the Neck for Me, Clark, and Jelly of the Month Mixed Fruit. Brand new to the area was Common Dialect. Even though we partook in the Girl Scout cookie beer flight, the Imperial Kolsch was a standout. We then slipped over to Seventh Son, who have a nice location with a very cool art exhibit for local artisans. The Unbeatable Odds table beer was a highlight. We needed some pub grub, so we headed towards Ybor City and Tampa Bay Brewing Company. I was a little skeptical because from the outside it just seemed like every other sports bar, but once we got seated, it was clear that they craft their food and beers with care. Hands down, the best French onion soup ever. And don't get me started on the bacon-wrapped meatloaf covered with gravy and onion straws. I crushed on some IPAs, finding Hop Solo 20 to be absolutely delicious with notes of melon, orange, and mango. After paying a flat fee $20 for parking in Ybor, WTF, Zydeco Brewing was next on our list. It was worth it. The Helles Lager, Bourbon El Fumato, was amazing. If you like bourbon on the rocks and can imagine for a moment after the ice melts just a touch to dilute the bourbon so that you get the taste but not the bite, well, this is exactly what it reminded me of. Had a big bourbon nose without the booziness. Mind blown. Oh, and of course, the best ever bread pudding we had here as well. The serving was massive and crazy good. Berry House Beer Company was another highly recommended stop. Since I was too cheap to pay for another $20 to park, I left the missus double parked out front while I ran in for a couple of quick tastes. They have a great German-inspired beer menu and didn't let me down with their flagship Vienna Lager, Family Tradition. I saw Bastet Brewing in the same direction as Coppertail, so we decided to stop in. Bastet was not even a blip on my radar. That has now changed, as Houston is brewing some pretty amazing stuff and I can't wait to get back there again. Ube Doobie Doo, a pumpkin yam beer brewed with the crazy purple-colored yam ube, was a definite highlight. We sat here for a very long time, chatting barside with brewer and barflies alike. It was getting late, but Coppertail was right down the road. I personally felt like it was overhyped, but I think if it hadn't been the last stop, I may not have felt that way. Exhausted, we finally headed home. Well, the final movement was a nice bookend to the epic day we had. We returned to Woven Water, where Jasmine once again served up some amazing beer, and we got to try out Isaac's world-famous burgers. Yes, they rank up there in my burger world. Metal Haven Angry Chair was next. Great industrial vibe, music I could relate to, and solid beers. Hidden Springs had been closed when we tried to go there during the first Tampa trip. I'm glad we tried again. They have great sour beers. Riot Juice with vanilla, blackberry, and lime really hit the spot. And because it was just through an alley on the other side of the block, we went to Garagiste Meadery. I know meat isn't for everyone. It's expensive for one thing, the ABVs are in the double digits, and the flavor combinations can be a little bit unapproachable for the novice. Let me just say, I cannot wait to come back here again. Depeche Mode Plus was brewed with grapes, pomegranates, and blueberries, aged on toasted oak, baldcyrus, and burana, and finished on white chocolate and vanilla beans. Wow. Peanut butter banana French toast was brewed with bananas, peanuts, maple syrup, and cinnamon. And yes, you could taste each and every nuance of those 2 meads. And thus ended the Tampa tour. When all was said and done, we hit over 30 breweries and I tasted 140 unique beers. Please keep in mind that many of these were tasters and that I rarely had more than a couple at each location or even finished them, but easily one of the best unintentional ale trail crawls in recent history. I can't wait to go back. I have my eye on Tarpon Springs and Dunedin for the next installment. In this segment of Homebrew Hijinks, it's bottle day. Once that fermentation finished, it was now time to bottle up my brew. I brought my fermenter up to the kitchen on bottle day eve just to make sure that the yeast was truly finished chewing on the sugars. I placed it on the counter to make it easier to gravity fill the bottles. I monitored it for 24 hours and saw no change. I then drew out a half a cup or so into a test vessel so that I could measure the specific gravity with my hydrometer. I finally purchased one. The reading came out to 1.01, which meant I had alcohol. Again, since I had neglected to do this step prior to fermentation, I could only guess what the final ABV would be, somewhere between 4 and 5%. Well, just like everything else leading up to this point, I needed to follow some disinfecting guidelines. I didn't want anything strange to get in and contaminate my brew. First, I dissolved a packet of disinfectant in my 1-gallon pitcher. Next, each of the 12 bottles was soaked in the solution just long enough to make sure that all the surfaces made contact with it. I put them upside down in a dish rack to dry while putting a dozen bottle caps in the solution. I filled the transfer tube and bottle filler in solution before I snugged it over the end of the spigot on my fermenter. I opened the spigot and drained the liquid into a clean bowl until the cleanser was gone from the line. The bottle filler is a pretty nifty gizmo. It's spring-loaded, so all you have to do is depress the end of it in order for the gravity-fed liquid to flow. Next, I transferred all my bottle caps and bottles right side up onto a couple of clean dishcloths on the floor to account for any mess I might encounter. In order to carbonate the bottle, I added a fizz drop to each one prior to filling it. I placed the bottle filler into the bottle, pushed it down, and watched the bottle fill up nearly to the top. I removed the bottle filler and placed a cap on the bottle. Using the bottle capper, which is pretty foolproof, I sealed the bottle up. I repeated this process, and in the end, I managed to fill and cap 8 bottles with my new brew. I had to be a little bit careful when I got to the last couple of bottles, simply because I had so much sediment at the bottom of my fermenter. Because the beer needs to condition, I put it back in the basement for 2 weeks to carbonate. The location needed to be dark and somewhere between 65 and 75 degrees. So I put the bottles back in the box they arrived in and let them sit. Once this 2-week waiting period was up, it was time to refrigerate and enjoy. I cleaned up the fermenter and tubing with the disinfecting solution and let them air dry before I put them away for the next brewing adventure. Coming up, I'll review the final product.
Last call.
It's nearly time to wrap things up, but first, one more for the road. This episode, I'm drinking Seas Get Degrees from the FBP Homebrew Project. From the brewer, this session IPA contains Centennial, Cascade, and Citra hops. A passable first attempt. Could be better, could be worse. Without further delay, well, this beer comes in around 4 to 5% ABV. I'm going to pour this out into a fun kind of flask that I got from a place called X Fermentation. So it may seem a little bit narcissistic for me to review one of my own beers, but I think it's only natural considering you've been on this homebrewing journey with me throughout the first part of this year. So this beer pours a pale amber color. It has a nice fine white foamy head to it. On the nose, I'm getting just a little bit of some tropical notes, definitely coming from the Citra. So first sip impression here. It's nice and light on the palate. So it's got just a little bit of a malty backbone to it, just a hint, not overly so. And I wonder what an all-grain bill would look like compared to this extract recipe that I used. It has a nice citrus kind of bitterness on the front. Actually kind of lingers a bit. So I definitely can see from the Centennial, from the Cascade hops, that it definitely gives you that almost mouth coating, that drying effect that happens with some of the various hop varieties. It reminds me a little bit of maybe kind of a cross between a two-hearted in that bitterness kind of profile and the lightness, like with a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. So somewhere in between there. And I guess that makes sense since it is just a session IPA. So as I swirl the beer around a little bit in the glass, I definitely am picking up a lot more of the citrusy notes that last edition of Citra was at the flame out. Again, I think it turned out pretty well. It's got a nice grapefruit kind of hit to it, and yeah, it's a solid session IPA. But definitely is crisp. It would definitely be something that on a hot summer day that I could crush on. I think that for a first attempt at brewing from a kit, I think it turned out okay, honestly. And I just want to give one more shout out to Trevor, the head brewer at One Well Brewing in Kalamazoo, for helping me out along the way when I had questions about doing my first homebrew project. Thanks, man, and cheers. So overall, I'd give this one 3 tasters out of 5 on the flight board. Cheers, FBP Homebrew Project. If you've got a beer you'd like me to drink and describe, leave a comment below. If you're a brewer and have one in mind, direct message me on Instagram and let's see what we can do. Well, that's all for this episode of the 5 Beer Plan. With so many podcasts out there, thanks for choosing to listen to mine. Join me next time as I resume my regular interview segments next month. Remember to hit the subscribe button to be notified of new episodes. I'd love to hear from you, so please follow me on Instagram, 5 Beer Plan 2022, and leave a comment to let me know whether you've ever homebrewed before. Be sure to support your local breweries, choose your beers wisely, and drink them responsibly. Until next time, keep walking your ale trail, and stay thirsty, my friends. You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go. Okay, thanks for sticking it out for an extra couple of minutes. Not everybody sticks around to the end credits of the movie, but I do. I'm one of those people that gets sucked in. So the question for you, my faithful listener, is what should my next homebrew project be? So the first person to direct message me on Instagram, 5beerplan 2022, and let me know what my next homebrew project should be, I will collaborate with you and we'll figure out what the recipe should look like. Cheers!